In exactly 11 minutes, the king will be dead. Claire Bennett wasn't supposed to understand the sentence. The two men standing beneath the crystal balcony had chosen flawless French for a reason. Around them, violin music drifted through the grand ballroom, champagne glasses shimmered beneath towering chandeliers, and more than 300 elegantly dressed guests laughed as though nothing in the world could disturb the evening. Claire kept her eyes lowered as she balanced a silver tray across her palms, weaving carefully between marble columns polished so perfectly they reflected every flicker of candlelight. Her black serving shoes pinched after 14 straight hours on her feet, and her paycheck from the Crescent Royal Hotel still wouldn't cover next month's rent in Boston. None of that mattered now. Her heartbeat drowned out the orchestra as the men's quiet conversation reached her again. "No mistakes this time," one of them murmured. "When the clock reaches 9:23, everyone will believe it was an unfortunate accident." Claire slowed her pace without meaning to. She had learned French from her grandfather, a retired language professor who believed every language carried the soul of its people. He used to insist that understanding words meant understanding intentions. Tonight, she wished she understood nothing. She forced herself to continue walking toward table 16, where crystal glasses waited to be refilled, but every instinct urged her to turn back. The men looked ordinary enough. Expensive tuxedos. Polished shoes. Calm expressions. Yet neither smiled with their eyes. One casually checked the antique watch on his wrist while the other lifted a wineglass without taking a sip. 11 minutes, the first repeated softly. "His security has already been redirected." Claire nearly stumbled. She glanced toward the center of the ballroom where every guest seemed subtly oriented, as though invisible gravity pulled them in one direction. There, surrounded by quiet space no one dared invade, stood a man dressed entirely in black. He appeared no older than 35, impossibly composed beneath the golden light. His skin was strikingly pale, almost luminous against the dark fabric of his tailored suit. Thick black hair framed sharp features that looked carved from marble, while calm silver eyes swept across the ballroom with effortless awareness. Claire had heard whispers all evening. Billionaire. Philanthropist. Reclusive international investor. Nobody had agreed on exactly who he was, only that powerful people treated him like royalty. She watched senators wait for him to finish speaking before answering. CEOs straightened their jackets when he merely looked their way. Even the hotel's owner had personally greeted him at the entrance. Mr. Ashford, everyone called him. Claire had never heard the name before tonight. Somewhere nearby, a grandfather clock chimed the quarter hour. She instinctively looked toward it, then back at the men. 10 minutes left. Her fingers tightened around the tray until the polished metal dug into her skin. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe this was a business metaphor. Maybe they were actors rehearsing lines for a charity performance. Yet the fear rising inside her refused every reasonable explanation. One of the men reached into his jacket, not dramatically, simply with practiced confidence, and withdrew a folded white envelope sealed with dark wax. "Everything changes after tonight," he whispered. "The throne will finally be empty." Claire's breath caught. Throne. Not company. Not empire. A throne. Before she could process the word, Mr. Ashford slowly lifted his head from across the ballroom. For one impossible second, his silver eyes met hers through the sea of glittering guests. He showed no expression whatsoever. Yet Claire had the overwhelming feeling he had somehow noticed the exact moment her world changed. Claire forced herself to breathe normally as she crossed the ballroom, but every glance at the antique clock tightened the knot in her chest. 9 minutes remained. The silver tray suddenly felt twice as heavy, and the cheerful conversation surrounding her became nothing more than distant noise. She replayed every French sentence in her mind, testing each word, hoping she had misunderstood a tense or mistaken a phrase. She had not. They had spoken. With absolute certainty, discussing schedules instead of possibilities, confidence instead of guesses. Whatever they intended had already begun. She reached table 16 and carefully filled the waiting crystal glasses without spilling a single drop. Years of working impossible shifts had taught her how to hide exhaustion behind a polite smile, but hiding fear proved much harder. One of the guests thanked her without looking up. Another continued discussing stock prices. No one noticed the young waitress whose thoughts raced faster than the violin melody echoing beneath the towering ceiling. Claire risked another glance toward the two men. They had separated naturally, blending into different circles of wealthy guests as though they had never spoken to each other. It was practiced. Intentional. Professional. Every instinct told her they had done this before. She looked toward Mr. Ashford again. He now stood beside the hotel's owner and several influential business leaders, listening far more than he spoke. Whenever he answered, the others leaned closer, hanging on every calm sentence. Nothing about him suggested nervousness. He looked completely aware of every movement inside the ballroom without appearing to watch anyone directly. His silver eyes reflected the candlelight with an unusual brightness that Claire could not explain. 8 minutes. She had to warn someone. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, Claire approached her supervisor near the service entrance. Marcus barely looked away from his clipboard before speaking. Claire, table 20 needs fresh champagne. Marcus, I need to tell you something important. Her voice remained low. I overheard two guests discussing what sounded like a real threat against Mr. Ashford. Marcus sighed impatiently. This is one of the most secure charity galas in the country. Secret Service agents are here. Private security is here. Boston police officers are outside. Do your job and let professionals handle security. But they gave a specific time. Enough. He straightened his tie. If you start frightening guests with conspiracy stories, you will not have a job tomorrow. Claire swallowed the rest of her words. She watched Marcus disappear toward another dining section, leaving her alone with growing panic. 7 minutes. She considered calling 911 herself, but what would she report? Two strangers speaking French during a charity gala? She had no names. No photographs. No evidence beyond words only she had understood. Her phone remained locked inside the employee locker downstairs anyway. Suddenly the ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the orchestra transitioned into a slower arrangement. Every guest instinctively turned toward the central staircase where Mr. Ashford had begun walking alone toward the raised platform prepared for the evening's keynote remarks. The applause that greeted him sounded respectful rather than enthusiastic, almost ceremonial. Claire noticed something else. Security personnel subtly shifted positions around the room, but one section near the eastern balcony remained strangely unattended. The exact direction where she had first overheard the conversation. 6 minutes. Her pulse hammered inside her ears. She no longer cared whether anyone believed her. She stepped away from the service station and started moving directly toward the staircase. Before she had taken more than 3 steps, a tall man in a perfectly tailored black suit quietly appeared in front of her. His expression remained polite, but his posture blocked her path completely. Miss Bennet, he said with surprising calm, our king would like a word with you before you do anything that cannot be undone. Claire stared at the man blocking her path, certain she had never seen him before. He looked no older than 40, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his posture impossibly still despite the hundreds of guests flowing around him. Nothing about his appearance drew attention, yet everyone instinctively walked around him without making contact, as though an invisible boundary surrounded him. I do not understand, Claire whispered. How do you know my name? The man offered the faintest smile. Our king prefers to know the names of people who notice unusual things. Claire's heartbeat skipped. King, she repeated before remembering the strange word the conspirators had used. Only moments earlier. Throne. King. None of it made sense. Please, she said urgently. I have to warn Mr. Ashford. There are 2 men planning something. They spoke in French because they believed nobody could understand them. The stranger studied her face for a long second. He did not look surprised. He looked curious. Exactly what did you hear? Claire repeated every sentence as accurately as she could, translating each phrase into English while struggling to keep her voice steady. She even described the envelope sealed with dark wax and the exact time mentioned in the conversation. The man's expression never changed, but his pale blue eyes sharpened with each detail. When she finished, he glanced toward the antique clock. 5 minutes remained. "Come with me," he said quietly. "There is no time to waste." Before Claire could answer, he guided her through a narrow corridor hidden behind velvet curtains beside the orchestra. The sounds of music faded almost instantly, replaced by silence so complete she could hear her own breathing. The hallway was lined with polished black stone instead of marble, decorated with portraits of unfamiliar men and women dressed in clothing from centuries long past. Every painted face carried the same calm, commanding expression. Claire had worked at the Crescent Royal for almost 2 years, yet she had never known this hallway existed. "Who are these people?" she asked softly. "Family," the man replied. "Very old family." They reached an elegant pair of carved wooden doors. Without knocking, the stranger opened one and stepped aside. "His Majesty will see you now." Claire froze. Standing beside a tall window overlooking the illuminated city skyline was Lucian Ashford. Without the noise of the ballroom surrounding him, his presence felt entirely different. He seemed taller somehow, quieter, almost untouched by the passage of time itself. Moonlight spilled across his impossibly pale face, giving his silver eyes an almost luminous quality. He turned toward her with calm curiosity rather than alarm. "Miss Bennet," he said in an even voice. "You have been looking for me." Claire nodded immediately. "You are in danger." Lucian gestured toward a chair, but she remained standing. "Please listen," she continued. "I know this sounds impossible, but 2 men are planning something at exactly 9:23. They spoke French because they thought nobody nearby would understand them." Lucian listened without interrupting. He neither questioned her intelligence nor dismissed her concern. When she finished repeating every word, he walked toward the antique clock standing beside the fireplace. 4 minutes remained. "Your French is excellent," he observed. Claire blinked in confusion. "My grandfather taught me." "A remarkable man, I imagine." "How do you know about my grandfather?" Lucian smiled faintly without answering. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his black jacket and removed the same white envelope Claire had seen earlier in the ballroom. The identical dark wax seal reflected the firelight. Claire stared at it in disbelief. "That is impossible," she whispered. "One of those men was carrying that exact envelope." "Not the exact one," Lucian corrected gently. "Only one made to resemble it." He broke the seal with effortless precision and unfolded a single sheet of thick cream-colored paper. There were no words inside. Only an intricate symbol drawn in silver ink that seemed to shimmer beneath the light. Claire frowned. "It is blank except for that crest." Lucian looked directly into her eyes. "To almost everyone else in this building," he said quietly, "it is completely blank. Tell me, Miss Bennet, what else can you read?" Claire lowered her eyes to the strange silver symbol, expecting to see nothing more than an elegant crest. Instead, faint lines slowly spread across the page like frost forming on a winter window. Delicate letters emerged one after another, glowing so softly she wondered whether they were reflecting the fireplace or creating their own light. She instinctively read the first sentence aloud. "The crown remains only while the moon remembers its first promise." The room fell completely silent. Claire looked up immediately. "I am sorry. I did not mean to read without permission." Lucian did not answer at once. His silver eyes remained fixed on her face with an expression she could not understand. It was neither surprise nor disbelief. It was recognition. The man who had escorted her into the room quietly closed the heavy wooden doors behind them before speaking for the first time. She read it perfectly. Lucian nodded once. "Every word." Claire frowned in confusion. "What is happening?" she asked. "It was written in an unusual form of French, was it not?" Lucian slowly folded the paper and placed it back inside the envelope. No, Miss Bennet. It was not French. He walked toward the fireplace with calm, measured steps. That language disappeared centuries ago. Even among my own people, only a handful can still recognize its symbols. No human has read those words in generations. Claire shook her head. That cannot be true. I have never seen those letters before in my life. That, Lucian replied quietly, is exactly what concerns me. The grandfather clock beside the fireplace began chiming again. 3 minutes remained until the appointed time. Instead of showing fear, Lucian calmly adjusted the cuff of his black jacket as though preparing for an ordinary speech. Claire could no longer remain silent. Why are you acting as though none of this matters? Those men are still out there. They believe something will happen in only a few minutes. Lucian turned toward the tall windows overlooking the ballroom below. Through the glass, Claire could see hundreds of guests moving gracefully beneath glittering chandeliers, completely unaware of the conversation taking place above them. Because, Lucian answered, I have known about tonight for almost 6 months. Claire stared at him. You knew. Someone inside my own circle has been feeding information to those who wish to remove me. His voice remained remarkably calm. Every false document, every altered security schedule, every rumor has been carefully placed where it would eventually reach the right ears. Claire felt her confusion deepen. Then tonight is a trap. A test, Lucian corrected gently. Not only for those who believe they are hunting me. Before Claire could ask another question, the elegant man standing near the door lifted one hand toward his ear. Listening to words transmitted through a nearly invisible communication device. He nodded once before speaking. The Eastern Gallery is now occupied exactly as predicted. Every participant has taken position. Lucian inclined his head slightly. Very good. Claire looked from one man to the other. Then why did you bring me here? Lucian met her eyes again. Because you were never supposed to understand their conversation. He paused before continuing. Everything else followed naturally. You tried to warn complete strangers despite believing they would never believe you. You risked your livelihood without expecting any reward. That decision told me far more about your character than weeks of investigation ever could. Claire blinked. Investigation. Lucian walked to a small table where an old leather folder rested untouched. He opened it and gently turned the top page toward her. Claire's breath caught. It contained her employment records, volunteer work at the neighborhood literacy center, university transcripts she had never shared publicly, and even a faded newspaper clipping showing her as a 12-year-old standing beside her grandfather during a local language competition. Who are you? She whispered. Lucian answered with complete composure. The question, Miss Bennet, is no longer who I am. His silver eyes reflected the firelight with an ancient stillness. It is why someone spent years quietly watching you before either of us ever knew tonight would happen. Claire could not take her eyes off the folder resting on the table. Every page revealed another piece of her ordinary life, yet together they formed a portrait she had never imagined anyone would assemble. Her volunteer hours at the literacy center. The scholarship she had lost after her grandfather became ill. Her part-time jobs. Even a faded photograph of her standing beside an old oak tree outside her childhood home. Why would anyone watch me? She asked quietly. Lucian closed the folder with deliberate care. That is precisely what I have been trying to discover. Before Claire could respond, the elegant man near the door lifted his wrist and glanced at a thin silver watch. 1 minute. He announced calmly. Lucian nodded once and walked toward the wide window overlooking the ballroom. Below them, the evening continued as though nothing unusual existed. Guests applauded as musicians finished another classical piece. Waiters carried polished trays through the glittering hall. Wealthy donors exchanged warm smiles beneath enormous crystal chandeliers. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Claire stepped beside him. If you know where they are, why not stop them now? Lucian answered without looking away from the ballroom. Because the two men you overheard were never the true danger. He pointed almost casually toward the eastern balcony where one of the French-speaking men now stood alone, holding a champagne glass. He believes he is leading tonight's operation. Claire followed his gaze. He is not. No. Lucian's voice remained calm. He is merely convinced that he is important. Claire slowly realized what he meant. Someone else has been giving the orders. Someone much closer. At that exact moment another figure entered the ballroom below. Unlike the other guests, he did not pause to greet anyone. He walked directly toward the center platform with the confidence of someone who belonged there. He appeared to be in his early 60s, distinguished, silver-haired, wearing a midnight blue tuxedo with an antique emerald pin on the lapel. Several influential guests greeted him respectfully. The hotel owner even bowed his head slightly before speaking with him. Claire studied the newcomer. "Who is he?" Lucian answered after a brief silence. "Lord Sebastian Whitmore. Another billionaire." Lucian smiled faintly. "That is what the newspapers believe." Claire noticed something strange immediately. As Lord Sebastian crossed the ballroom, both French-speaking men subtly acknowledged him without making eye contact. A nearly invisible movement. A slight adjustment of posture. A single touch to the cuff of a sleeve. Small gestures that meant nothing to everyone else. Everything to someone watching carefully. "They know him," Claire whispered. "Yes." Lucian folded his hands behind his back. "They have served him for decades." Claire looked at him in disbelief. "Then he is the one behind all of this." Lucian slowly shook his head. "He is behind tonight. He may not be behind everything." The grandfather clock struck once. 9:23. Claire instinctively held her breath. Nothing happened. No panic. No screams. No confusion. The orchestra continued playing. Guests applauded another announcement. Waiters continued serving desserts. The ballroom remained peaceful. Claire looked around anxiously. Was the time wrong? "No," Lucian replied. "The schedule changed because of you." Claire turned toward him. "Me? You forced them to improvise the moment you overheard the conversation." He glanced toward Lord Sebastian again. Plans built over months collapsed because one waitress understood a language she was never expected to know. At that moment Lord Sebastian slowly lifted his eyes toward the private window overlooking the ballroom. Across the distance, his gaze met Lucian's without hesitation. Neither man smiled. Neither acknowledged the other. Yet Claire felt an invisible conversation pass between them. Respect. Suspicion. Challenge. Then, to Claire's astonishment, Lord Sebastian's attention shifted directly onto her. His expression remained perfectly composed, but something behind his calm smile seemed to measure her as though she had suddenly become the most valuable person in the room. Lucian noticed it immediately. His silver eyes hardened for the first time that evening. "It begins sooner than I expected," he said quietly. "He knows exactly who you are now. The only problem is that he still believes you are simply an ordinary human. I intend to keep him believing that for as long as possible." Claire continued watching the ballroom below, but the celebration no longer resembled an elegant charity gala. Every smile looked rehearsed. Every handshake seemed to conceal another layer of meaning. Even the musicians appeared different now, their graceful performance unfolding beneath an invisible current of secrets she had never imagined existed. Lord Sebastian had already disappeared into another circle of distinguished guests, yet Claire could still feel the weight of his brief glance. It lingered like an unanswered question. "If he believes I am only a waitress," she asked quietly, "why would he care about me at all?" Lucian remained beside the window, his silver eyes following every subtle movement across the ballroom. "Because people like Sebastian understand patterns," he replied. "An unexpected variable is often more dangerous than an obvious enemy." Claire folded her arms, trying to steady herself. "I am not a variable. I work double shifts, I pay rent every month, and until tonight I believed the most complicated part of my life was deciding which bills could wait another week." Lucian looked at her with an expression that almost resembled sympathy. "That was the life you believed you had?" Before Claire could ask what he meant, the elegant man by the door stepped forward carrying a narrow wooden box carved with unfamiliar silver markings. He placed it carefully upon the table without speaking. Lucian opened the lid. Inside rested several aged journals, their leather covers worn smooth with time. The pages appeared centuries old, yet every volume had been preserved with extraordinary care. "Your grandfather once owned something remarkably similar," Lucian said. Claire stared at him in disbelief. "My grandfather collected dictionaries and history books." "Nothing like this." Lucian gently opened one journal to a page filled with graceful symbols unlike any alphabet Claire had ever studied. The moment she looked down, faint meaning began forming inside her mind before she consciously translated the words. It felt less like reading and more like remembering. She spoke almost without realizing it. "The keeper shall recognize the truth not through memory but through kindness freely given." Her own voice sounded distant. Claire immediately stepped back. "How did I know that?" Lucian slowly closed the journal. "That sentence has not been translated correctly for over 200 years. Claire shook her head. "Someone must have taught me without my realizing it." "No." Lucian's answer was gentle but certain. "Languages can be studied. Recognition cannot." Silence settled over the room. The crackling fireplace suddenly seemed much louder than before. Claire glanced toward the old journals again but resisted the urge to touch them. "You keep saying I was being watched," she said. "Does this have something to do with my family?" Lucian nodded. Many generations ago there existed a small circle of human scholars entrusted with preserving knowledge too valuable to disappear. They never ruled kingdoms. They never carried crowns. Their responsibility was simpler. They remembered what others forgot. Claire frowned. "My family never mentioned anything like that. Because someone worked very hard to erase every trace." Lucian walked toward a large map displayed along the opposite wall. Ancient cities were marked with silver ink instead of black. Several locations had been carefully crossed out over time. He pointed toward a tiny coastal village in western France. "Your grandfather visited this place exactly 28 years ago." Claire's eyes widened. "I remember that trip. He always called it a research vacation. It was far more than research." Lucian looked back at her. He spent 3 days inside a forgotten monastery searching for a single missing manuscript. Claire searched her memories. She remembered waiting outside among flowering gardens while her grandfather disappeared inside weathered stone buildings for hours at a time. When he returned, he had looked strangely disappointed but refused to explain why. "He never found it," Claire whispered. Lucian's expression remained unreadable. "No. Because someone else had already removed it decades earlier." Claire felt another realization slowly settle into place. "You were searching for the same manuscript." Lucian gave a quiet nod. "For more than 100 years. He paused before adding, "Tonight, after listening to you read words no living scholar should recognize, I believe that manuscript may never have been the true prize. I believe the person capable of understanding it has finally walked back into my life." Claire slowly approached the ancient map, unable to ignore the strange feeling pulling her toward the faded silver markings. The names of forgotten villages, abandoned monasteries, and mountain fortresses meant nothing to her, yet several locations stirred distant memories she could not explain. It felt like hearing the faint echo of a song she had known as a child but had long forgotten. Lucian watched her quietly, saying nothing as she studied the weathered parchment. Finally, Claire raised one trembling finger and pointed toward a small island marked only by an unfamiliar symbol. "That place should not be there," she said almost absent-mindedly. The room became completely still. The elegant man standing near the door looked sharply toward Lucian. "Your Majesty," he whispered. Lucian lifted one hand, signaling him to remain silent. "Why do you believe it should not be there?" Claire stared at the map, confused by her own certainty. Because the shoreline changed centuries ago. The monastery was moved inland after the sea swallowed the old harbor. The words escaped her before she could stop them. She immediately covered her mouth. I do not know why I said that. Lucian slowly walked toward the map. His silver eyes examined the exact location Claire had indicated. The official maps still show the original coastline, he said softly. Only one surviving journal ever mentioned that the harbor disappeared. Claire stepped back. I have never seen that journal. I know. Lucian's voice remained calm, yet Claire sensed genuine astonishment beneath his composure. The elegant man retrieved another leather volume from the wooden box and carefully opened it to an illustrated page. A detailed drawing showed the same monastery standing beside the ocean. Beneath the illustration, several lines of unfamiliar writing covered the yellowed parchment. Claire glanced down. Once again the symbols seemed to rearrange themselves inside her mind, becoming perfectly understandable. She quietly read, when the waters rise, the guardian shall carry knowledge inland, but the final keeper will remember the first shore even after every stone has vanished. Silence followed her translation. The fire cracked gently behind them. Somewhere far below, faint applause drifted upward from the ballroom, reminding Claire that the gala continued as though nothing extraordinary was unfolding above it. This is impossible, she whispered. Every time I look at these pages, it feels less like learning and more like remembering someone else's memories. Lucian nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps they were never someone else's. Claire turned toward him. You keep speaking in riddles. Because certainty is dangerous until every piece fits together. He walked toward an old oak cabinet built into the wall and unlocked a narrow drawer using a small silver key. Inside rested a delicate pocket watch unlike any Claire had ever seen. Instead of numbers, the face displayed elegant symbols arranged in a circular pattern. Lucian carefully placed it in her hands. Tell me what time it shows. Claire looked down. The symbols seemed unfamiliar for only a heartbeat before they transformed into clear meaning. Almost midnight, she answered. 3 minutes before. The elegant man inhaled sharply. She read the royal dial. Claire looked up in confusion. Was that wrong? Lucian gently accepted the watch back and closed the drawer. No human outside my family has ever identified those markings correctly. Claire felt a chill despite the warmth of the fireplace. Then my grandfather knew. Lucian considered the question carefully before answering. No. If he had, he would never have spent his life searching for translations. Claire frowned. Then why can I? Lucian remained silent for several long moments before finally speaking. Because I no longer believe your grandfather was searching for ancient knowledge. His silver eyes met hers with quiet certainty. I believe he was searching for you long before you were old enough to understand why. Claire remained silent as Lucian's final words settled over the room. Her grandfather had never treated her like someone extraordinary. He had taught her languages because he believed every child deserved to understand different cultures. He had filled her summers with old books, crossword puzzles, and stories about forgotten libraries simply because he loved history. At least, that was what she had always believed. Now every memory seemed to shift beneath her feet. She remembered evenings when he would suddenly stop reading and study her with quiet curiosity, as though waiting for something that never happened. She remembered him refusing to answer certain questions about their family, always smiling gently before saying, some answers belong to the right moment. Claire had assumed he was protecting old family secrets. She had never imagined he was protecting her. A gentle knock echoed through the chamber. The elegant guardian opened the door only slightly before speaking in a calm voice. Your Majesty, the council has arrived ahead of schedule. Lucian's expression remained composed. How many? 7. The guardian hesitated before adding, Lord Sebastian requested an immediate audience. He insists tonight's events require a formal explanation. Lucian nodded once. Of course he does. Claire looked between them. What council? Lucian turned toward her. The people who believe they help preserve order. His tone remained courteous, but Claire sensed an unmistakable edge beneath the calm words. They also dislike surprises. The guardian stepped aside as another man entered carrying a polished silver tablet engraved with an intricate circular crest. He bowed respectfully before presenting it to Lucian. The chamber is prepared. Lucian accepted the tablet, then unexpectedly handed it to Claire. Read the inscription. Claire looked down. Once again the elegant symbols rearranged themselves before her eyes. Truth carries no crown unless wisdom chooses humility, she read softly. Power follows service, never pride. The messenger froze. His face lost all color. She read the oath. Lucian simply took the tablet back and thanked the messenger before dismissing both men. When the doors closed again, Claire looked at him anxiously. I keep doing this without understanding how. Lucian walked toward a tall mirror framed with dark carved wood. Unlike every other mirror Claire had ever seen, its surface reflected more than the room itself. For an instant she thought she saw endless shelves of ancient books stretching into darkness before the image returned to normal. There are gifts, Lucian said quietly, that reveal themselves only when they are finally needed. Claire stepped closer to the mirror. Are you saying this is some kind of gift? I believe it is a responsibility. Before she could ask another question, voices drifted faintly from the hallway beyond the heavy doors. They remained calm, almost courteous, but Claire sensed unmistakable tension beneath every carefully chosen word. One voice belonged to Lord Sebastian. She recognized its smooth confidence immediately. Surely His Majesty understands why the council must meet the young woman. Another voice answered. She is only a hotel employee. Lord Sebastian responded without hesitation. That assumption is exactly why I wish to meet her. Claire felt a chill travel through her shoulders. Lucian heard the exchange as well. Without the slightest sign of urgency, he walked toward an antique wardrobe standing beside the fireplace and opened one of its hidden compartments. Inside rested a slender silver pendant suspended from a midnight blue ribbon. At its center was the same mysterious symbol Claire had translated several times that evening. Lucian held it for a thoughtful moment before placing it gently into Claire's hands. Keep this with you, he said. Do not remove it unless I ask you to. Claire looked down at the pendant. The metal felt unexpectedly warm against her fingertips. What does it do? Lucian smiled very slightly. For tonight, it helps the world continue believing you are exactly who you appear to be. Outside the chamber, the conversation stopped abruptly. A slow, deliberate knock echoed through the heavy doors. Then Lord Sebastian's calm voice carried clearly into the room. Your Majesty, I believe it is time we all became properly acquainted with Miss Claire Bennet. Lucian remained perfectly still as the measured knocking echoed through the chamber. The silence that followed felt heavier than the sound itself. Claire instinctively closed her fingers around the silver pendant, surprised by the steady warmth flowing through the polished metal. Somehow it calmed the racing thoughts inside her mind. Lucian walked toward the great wooden doors without haste, every movement carrying the effortless confidence of someone who had ruled through centuries of uncertainty. Before reaching the entrance, he paused beside Claire. Whatever you hear during the next few minutes, he said quietly, answer only what you know to be true. You do not need to impress anyone in that room. Claire nodded, though her heart continued pounding. The doors opened. 7 distinguished men and women entered with quiet dignity, each dressed in formal evening attire that reflected generations of refinement rather than modern fashion. Their eyes settled on Claire almost immediately. None of them appeared hostile. None appeared welcoming either. They simply observed her with extraordinary concentration, as scholars might study an artifact they had believed lost forever. Lord Sebastian entered last. His expression remained warm, almost grandfatherly, yet Claire sensed the careful intelligence behind every smile. Your Majesty, he said with a respectful inclination of his head, forgive our interruption. Tonight has produced developments none of us anticipated. Lucian answered with perfect courtesy. Unexpected events often reveal the truth more efficiently than carefully arranged plans. Sebastian's gaze shifted toward Claire. Miss Bennet, I understand you possess remarkable linguistic talents. Claire answered honestly. Until tonight I believed they were ordinary. A faint murmur passed among the council members. One elderly woman stepped forward carrying a small velvet case. She opened it to reveal a single silver coin unlike any Claire had ever seen. One side displayed the same mysterious symbol she had translated throughout the evening. The other showed a flowering tree beneath a crescent moon. Would you tell us what is written here? The woman asked gently. Claire looked down. The familiar sensation returned instantly. The symbols no longer appeared strange. They felt comforting, almost familiar. She spoke without hesitation. Knowledge belongs to every generation, but wisdom belongs only to those who choose kindness above power. The elderly woman's eyes widened. She slowly closed the velvet case without another word. Lord Sebastian remained composed, yet Claire noticed the slightest tightening around his eyes. He had expected uncertainty. Instead, every answer seemed to deepen the mystery surrounding her. After several long moments, Sebastian smiled politely. Remarkable indeed. Lucian stepped forward, placing himself naturally beside Claire rather than in front of her. The gesture seemed small, but every member of the council noticed it. This evening has already confirmed everything I needed to know, Lucian said. Miss Bennet acted with integrity when she believed she had nothing to gain. She attempted to protect a stranger at considerable personal cost. Character revealed under pressure deserves recognition. Sebastian folded his hands. Recognition is appropriate. Attachment may be premature. Lucian met his gaze calmly. I rarely make premature decisions. The room fell silent once more. Claire sensed invisible history moving beneath the conversation, old disagreements expressed through flawless manners and carefully chosen words. Finally Lucian turned toward the council. There will be no investigation of Miss Bennet. No restrictions upon her movements. No questioning beyond this evening. His voice remained gentle, yet every syllable carried unquestionable authority. From this moment forward, she stands under my personal protection. No one argued. Even Sebastian simply inclined his head. As you wish, Your Majesty. Yet before leaving, he looked directly at Claire one final time. Some destinies begin with a single conversation overheard by chance, he said softly. Others began centuries before anyone was born. I hope, Miss Bennet, that one day you discover which kind belongs to you. The council departed as quietly as they had arrived. When the great doors finally closed, the room seemed lighter somehow. Claire exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Is it over? She asked. Lucian looked toward the city lights beyond the window, where dawn's earliest hint had begun softening the darkness along the horizon. No, he answered with a faint smile. Tonight was only the moment two paths finally crossed. He turned back toward her, his silver eyes reflecting the first light of morning. The future of my kingdom has searched for its missing voice for generations. He gently placed his hand over his heart. Before bowing with quiet respect. Claire Bennet, if you are willing, I would be honored if you allowed me to show you the world that has been waiting for you. And in time, when both your heart and your own choice are ready, I hope you will stand beside me not merely under my protection, but as my queen.